I was working at a multinational company when the CEO announced, "You're being transferred to Janitorial. We need fresh faces in your role." I asked, "What did I do wrong?" He shrugged, "You're just boring." I walked away in disbelief, but the next day he cried, "Our new hire wiped our servers clean." What happened next was, I had worked in IT for 15 years, 12 of them with Terraflex, a multinational cybersecurity company based in Chicago. I'm not flashy. I don't wear trendy glasses or use phrases like pivot the stack. I'm the kind of guy who keeps his code tight, documents everything, and makes sure the network doesn't collapse overnight. People like me don't usually make Reddit posts. But this isn't just about the office. It's about identity, pride, and what happens when the people you trust, in both business and life, decide you're dispensable. I lived in Naperville, Illinois, with my wife Anika and our 2 kids, Jordan and Clara. I thought we had a stable life. Anika was a nurse, always busy but grounded. We weren't the type to take couple selfies or post date nights on Facebook. But we shared responsibilities, raised our kids, and tried to keep things steady. When Maxwell Harlow became our new CEO, things started changing fast. He was all charisma and buzzwords, and from the beginning, I could feel I wasn't his type. He brought in a bunch of new faces, former startup guys who used words like disruptive and agile leadership in every sentence. The energy shifted. I ignored it at first, focusing on the systems, the infrastructure, the actual work. Then, out of nowhere, he held this all-hands meeting. We were all gathered in the conference room, and Maxwell walked up with a grin like he was hosting a game show. He pulled up a slide with a list of names. My name was first. He pointed to me in front of everyone and said, "You're being transferred to Janitorial." There was some awkward laughter. I waited for him to say he was kidding. He wasn't. When I asked what I did wrong, he just said, "You're boring. We need fresh energy and leadership." That was it. 15 years, dismissed with a shrug. I didn't make a scene. I packed up my desk, walked out. I remember the way the fluorescent lights in that office looked as I closed the door behind me. Hollow. When I told Anika what happened, she just stared at me. She didn't say much. Later that night, she asked, "So what now?" Her tone wasn't angry. Just tired. Almost as if she'd been expecting this fall. The next morning, chaos exploded. My phone was blowing up. The company had been breached. The new guy Maxwell brought in, some was from Silicon Valley named Travis, had wiped the servers. Client contracts, financial records, internal tools, backups, gone. It was so severe that even external partners couldn't log in. And Maxwell? He cried in a meeting. Cried. Real tears. Apparently, Travis had disappeared overnight. No trace. No contacts. No backups. That same day, our CTO, Alina, came to my house. She looked like she hadn't slept. "We need you," she said. "We've been hit. I know what Maxwell did to you was wrong. But we need your help." I asked, "Why now?" She looked down. "Because you're the only one who built the framework we just lost." I agreed, but on my terms. No titles. No red tape. Just me, with full access. I spent the next few days in a frenzy. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I dug through system remnants, broken trails, and corrupt logs. Everyone else had given up trying to trace Travis, but I found something. A tiny data ping, hidden in a forgotten printer's firmware. His backdoor. I followed it. Through proxies, fake IPs, obfuscated trails. Finally, it led me to a shared office space in Toronto. I handed the data to Alina. A few days later, he was caught at the airport with a fake passport and 2 hard drives in his carry-on. The company recovered. Barely. The board fired Maxwell within weeks. They offered me a permanent executive role. I said yes, but only if I could rebuild from the ground up. While the company's trust in me was restored, something at home started cracking. Anika had grown distant. Not in big, obvious ways. Just colder. She stopped asking about my day. She started working late more often, not texting back. I chalked it up to stress, exhaustion, the chaos of the last few months. But one night, when she left her phone in the kitchen, a message lit up. Can't wait to see you again. I've missed you. I stared at the name. Javier. I didn't recognize it at first. But then I remembered her mentioning an ER doctor at her hospital, once or twice, months ago. I opened the thread. I shouldn't have. But I did. It wasn't a one-time thing. It had been going on for over 6 months. Since before Maxwell demoted me. Since before I lost everything, professionally. I confronted her the next morning. She didn't deny it. I didn't want it to happen, she said. But you were just so distant. You never fought for anything. Not even your job. That one stung. She had made up her mind about me. That I was weak. Passive. Boring. The same word Maxwell used. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. That's not who I am, and even if I wanted to, the room was too quiet for rage. I just stood there, staring at her across the kitchen table, the soft hum of the fridge the only sound between us. You never fought for anything, she had said. I thought about that a lot in the days after. About how that single sentence managed to turn everything over in my head. I'd spent my entire career fighting for things, fighting for stability, for order, for structure. I had fought silently, through every late night securing company systems, through every ignored promotion, through every family dinner I skipped to resolve a crisis no one even knew about. But maybe that was the point. No one knew. And in my marriage, I'd been just as quiet. A provider. A presence. Predictable. Maybe that kind of reliability felt like background noise after a while. You only notice the absence of silence, not the presence of it. Anika and I had one long, painful conversation that night. We talked in circles. She cried, I didn't. I didn't even feel angry, just hollow. She said she hadn't been happy for years but didn't know how to say it. I asked her why she didn't just leave before it got to this. She had no answer. Or maybe she had too many. That weekend, I moved into the guest room. Jordan noticed right away. He was old enough to know something was wrong, but not old enough to grasp the full shape of it. Clara just kept asking why we weren't all eating dinner at the same table anymore. Anika and I agreed to keep things civil. She wanted to try counseling. I said I'd go, but truthfully, I knew I was already mentally on the other side of the door. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into it harder than ever, but this time with a strange clarity. I didn't have anything to prove anymore. I wasn't fighting for status or approval. I was rebuilding a system that had nearly collapsed. And with every firewall I rewrote, every patch I personally tested, I felt something in myself knit back together. Alina became a close ally through this time. Not in a romantic sense, she was married, and we didn't cross that line, but she understood the weight of rebuilding. We had coffee often, quiet lunches during long server tests. She never pried, but she listened when I did speak. That meant more than I can say. It was during one of those coffee breaks that she told me something I hadn't known. You know, Maxwell pushed to fire you completely, she said, not looking up from her mug. I was the one who said no. Told him that if he wanted you gone, it had to be on paper. He didn't want the liability. I blinked. Why'd you fight for me? She shrugged. Because I actually read the reports. And I knew who built the system we were standing on. I knew if things ever went sideways, we'd need you. That sat with me. Not because I needed the validation, but because someone had seen me. I just never knew it. Meanwhile, at home, Anika and I started therapy. We went for 6 sessions. We talked about how we drifted, how we both failed to communicate. But it always circled back to the same place. Trust. Once it's broken, it doesn't grow back the same. She asked me one night after a session if I thought we could ever get back to the people we were. I said, I don't think we'd been those people in years. There was no malice in it. Just honesty. And she didn't argue. Eventually, she brought up moving out. Said she'd found an apartment closer to her work. I told her I'd take over the mortgage, and we worked out a schedule for the kids. The night she left, Jordan didn't talk much. Clara cried herself to sleep. I sat in the living room after they'd gone to bed, staring at the wall, thinking about how fragile the idea of permanence really is. People always assume the hardest part of betrayal is the moment you find out. But the truth is, the hardest part is the silence that comes after. The hollowing out. The echo of your own voice when no one answers back. But strange as it sounds, that silence also gives you something else: space. Space to figure out who you are without the roles you've been clinging to. It was during those long, quiet weeks after Anika moved out that my life began to shift in ways I didn't expect. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, like how a house settles long after construction is done. Subtle creaks in the floor. The shifting weight of silence. I became, for the first time in my adult life, a single father most days of the week. That first morning after Anika left, Clara wandered into the kitchen in her mismatched pajamas, rubbing her eyes, and asked, "Is Mom coming back tonight?" "No, honey," I said, as gently as I could. "She's staying in her new place tonight." She just nodded, climbed into a kitchen chair, and waited quietly for cereal. That's what hit me the hardest, not the crying or the tantrums, but the quiet resignation in her face. Like she already knew things wouldn't go back to the way they were. Jordan took longer to speak about it. He was 14 then, hitting that age where emotions boil under the surface but rarely spill. He holed up in his room a lot, headphones always on, phone always glowing. I gave him space. Eventually, one night, I knocked and walked in with 2 sodas and just sat down on the edge of his bed. I didn't say anything right away. We just watched whatever video he had on his laptop in silence for a while. Some gaming walkthrough. Then he said, not looking at me, "Do you think she left because of us?" "No," I said immediately. "Not even a little. She didn't even say bye that morning. She probably didn't know how." That seemed to register. He didn't say anything else. But the next morning, he came downstairs without headphones on. We didn't talk about it again. Meanwhile, work had transformed into something different. Less of a job, more of a mission. With Maxwell gone, Alina was promoted to interim CEO while the board decided on a replacement, and she kept leaning on me, not just for tech direction, but for strategy, staffing, and stability. I became her unofficial second-in-command, though the title hadn't caught up yet. It was a strange feeling, to be so valued at work while simultaneously dissolving at home. I'd always thought of work as the thing that pulled me away from my family. Now, it felt like the place where I was rebuilding myself. The board started showing up more frequently. Their meetings became more than just check-ins. One day, I was asked to present a full postmortem on the breach, not just the technicals, but the human decisions that led to it. I was nervous. Not because I didn't know my stuff, but because I'd never been invited to speak in that room before. I walked them through the timeline, highlighting the oversights that allowed Travis to do what he did, and more importantly, how Maxwell's ego had opened the door. I didn't trash the man, didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. After the meeting, one of the board members, a woman named Cecilia Traeger, pulled me aside. "You're not what I expected," she said. I wasn't sure how to take that. "I mean," she continued, "Maxwell made you out to be some kind of deadweight. A relic." I half smiled. "He didn't like quiet people." "Neither did I, for a long time," she said. "But now I think the loud ones might be the most dangerous." That conversation stayed with me. At home, things found a rhythm. I learned to cook more than just spaghetti and frozen pizza. Clara became my shadow in the evenings, helping me chop vegetables, setting the table, humming under her breath. Jordan started asking to be dropped off at his friends' houses more, and I didn't push. I knew this was his way of processing. Anika and I kept things cordial. We used a shared calendar, exchanged polite texts. We never fought, but we also never laughed. The warmth was gone. I noticed she stopped mentioning Javier after the first month. I didn't ask. One Sunday, during pickup, Clara asked if she could skip going to her mom's that weekend. She said we were just going to clean her place and maybe go to the store, she explained, eyes avoiding mine. I'd rather stay here. I told her I'd talk to her mom. When I did, Anika sounded surprised. Almost hurt. She said that, she asked. I thought she enjoyed our time. Maybe she does, I said, trying to be diplomatic. But I think she feels more comfortable here. There was silence on the other end. You've always been better at routines, she finally said. I thought that bored me. Turns out, it was what held everything together. I didn't know what to say to that. I still don't. A few weeks later, I was at the office late when I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. Callum Reyes? The voice asked. Yes? This is Detective Harmon with the Toronto Police. We've recovered additional evidence related to the Terraflex breach, and we need to speak with you in person. I blinked. Is something wrong? We just need to clarify a few things. When's the soonest you can be here? The next day, I was on a plane to Canada. Toronto was colder than I remembered. I'd been there once before, years ago, for a tech conference. It had been summertime then, and I remembered walking by the harbor, eating a sad tuna sandwich while half listening to a podcast on server architecture. This time, it was early spring, the kind that still held on to winter like a bad habit. The wind off Lake Ontario bit through my jacket as I stepped into the precinct. Detective Harmon was waiting at the front desk. He was older, sharp-eyed, with that quietly skeptical look people in his line of work develop from hearing too many lies. Thanks for coming up, he said, shaking my hand. This shouldn't take long, but we've uncovered some concerning threads. We sat in a small interview room, the kind with scuffed tile and a two-way mirror that made you feel like you'd done something wrong, even if you hadn't. He pulled out a slim folder, opened it, and slid a few photos across the table. Hard drives. Laptops. A physical notebook, filled with scribbles and diagrams. These were recovered from the apartment Travis Yoon was renting under an alias. What we found was unexpected. He tapped a page. Your name appears in this notebook several times. Alongside company diagrams, system architecture, and notes about internal staff access. Some of its information is not available anywhere but inside Terraflex. Deep internal stuff. My stomach tightened. I'm not sure I follow. Harmon leaned back. I'm not suggesting you were involved. If anything, we believe you were the target. But it raises the question, why would a high-level infiltrator fixate on you in particular? I exhaled slowly. Because I built the architecture. I knew where the bones were buried. If I had been fired completely, he would have had less risk. Maxwell demoted me, but didn't cut my access completely. He nodded. That track. But here's where it gets messy. He slid over another document, an email printout. No sender, no full address. Just the body of the message. It read, Reyes is a dead end. No innovation. No threat. Remove him and make room. Trust me. I stared at it. What is this? An anonymous tip sent to a fake account Travis used for correspondence with someone we haven't identified yet. Our digital forensics team traced it back through layers of proxies, but it originated from Chicago. From inside your company's internal VPN. My hands tensed. Someone inside helped him? We believe so. It's likely Maxwell was manipulated, though his own arrogance didn't help. But this? This makes it look deliberate. Like someone inside wanted you out of the way. I felt like the floor had shifted under me. How much danger was I in? I asked quietly. Hard to say. But the way Travis operated, he was surgical. Cold. You were a variable he couldn't control. Removing you wasn't about convenience, it was strategic. I sat in silence for a long time. Eventually, Harmon said I could go. They'd keep me in the loop. He handed me his card, and as I stepped back into the cold Toronto air, a thought began to nag at me. Who inside TerraFlex had something to gain by removing me? I'd been so focused on Maxwell, on the external breach, that I hadn't considered something far worse, betrayal from within. Back in Chicago, I returned to work like nothing had happened. But I watched people differently. I noticed who stopped talking when I entered the room. Who avoided eye contact. Who acted too friendly. I reviewed old emails, looked at meeting invites I hadn't thought twice about at the time. He'd joined the company 6 months before him. There was one name that kept popping up, Darren Shore. Axwell. Mid-level infrastructure hire, but quickly climbed into leadership roles during the reorgs. He'd sat in on multiple meetings I hadn't attended. Some involved direct changes to server access protocols. I remembered thinking he was smart. Confidence. Always asking questions that sounded insightful, but now, in hindsight, had too much specificity. I pulled up logs. Access records. Permissions change. At first glance, everything seemed fine. But Darren had covered his tracks well, too well. That, in itself, was suspicious. So I dug deeper. And there it was, buried in metadata on a test server, a temporary admin credential issued for exactly 2 hours. It matched the timestamp of the anonymous tip Detective Harmon had shown me. And it had been approved by Darren. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the dark living room with my laptop, rereading the logs, trying to find a reason why. Why would someone like him want me out? That's when I found it, a file directory hidden on the mirrored server we used for simulations. Inside, I found old pitch decks, business proposals, none of them company sanctioned. It was a side project. A startup blueprint. Built using TerraFlex systems, code, and infrastructure. And Darren had been copying pieces of my architecture. Bit by bit. He wasn't just part of the breach, he had been using my work to build something of his own. I wasn't just a risk. I was in competition. Suddenly, the past year made a twisted kind of sense. Maxwell, oblivious, had been the puppet. Travis, the weapon. Darren? He was the architect behind it all. I printed everything out. Dozens of pages. Logs. Screenshots. Metadata. I organized it into a binder. The next morning, I slid it across Alina's desk. She read in silence for 20 minutes. Then she looked up at me, her face unreadable. "This changes everything," she said. I nodded. She closed the binder and stood. "Come with me." We walked to the boardroom together. Because I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. Alina didn't say a word as we walked. Just the sharp click of her heels echoing off the tiled hallway of the executive floor. My heart thudded with every step. The boardroom doors were open, which almost never happened unless a meeting had just ended. Most of the board was still seated, sipping coffee, scrolling phones, talking in low voices. But when Alina walked in with that look on her face, and me a step behind, the room quieted immediately. Cecilia Traeger, the board member who had once called me not what she expected, raised an eyebrow. "Something urgent?" Alina nodded. "Very." She gestured for me to speak. I placed the binder on the long oak table and opened it. "I have reason to believe that Darren Shore has not only acted unethically within TerraFlex but may have intentionally aided in the breach last year, or at the very least, leveraged the chaos for personal gain." That caught their attention. As I walked them through the logs, the metadata, the stealth project files, I could feel the room changing. The skepticism melted into cold realization. These were people who had been burned once before. They weren't eager for a repeat. Cecilia flipped through one of the documents. And all of this, you traced it back to him? Yes, I said. Everything. He wasn't just trying to hamper me, he was stealing proprietary data to launch a spin-off using our core architecture. Someone muttered a curse. Alina didn't blink. We've already frozen his access. Security is escorting him out of the building as we speak. I hadn't known that part, and I'll admit, it felt good. Cecilia leaned back, crossing her arms. What's your recommendation? Fire him, I said. Immediately. Pursue legal action for intellectual property theft. And issue a formal internal audit to ensure there are no other cracks. Alina nodded. Agreed. The board voted right there. Unanimous. Darren was gone before lunch. His desk cleared, badge revoked, name wiped from the system. We later learned that he'd funneled small parts of our systems through dummy accounts and shell companies, intending to pitch to private investors. One of those investors, ironically, happened to be married to a TerraFlex board member. Small world. We filed suit. Darren tried to fight it, but the evidence was airtight. He lost the case and was barred from working in the cybersecurity industry for 5 years. His fledgling startup? Dead in the water. Investors pulled out the second his name hit the headlines. He tried to reach out once, an email, thinly veiled apology. I didn't answer. Maxwell, by the way, had tried to pivot to a thought leadership role online. Writing LinkedIn posts about resilience in failure and the art of disruption. Last I checked, he was consulting part-time for a startup that hadn't paid its employees in 3 months. I didn't feel bad for him. As for me? The board offered me the official title of Chief Security Officer. Not interim. Not temporary. Real authority, full pay bump, complete freedom to rebuild the systems how I saw fit. I accepted, but with one condition: I wanted to establish a new mentorship and ethics program inside the company. If you want long-term security, I told them, you need to grow people with values, not just skills. They agreed. 6 months later, I was overseeing a department triple the size it had been. More diverse, more thoughtful, and, this time, respected. People stopped calling me boring. Not because I suddenly became flashy, but because they finally understood what quiet competence looks like. At home, the dust began to settle too. Anika and I finalized the divorce with minimal friction. We stayed civil for the kids, and over time, the tension gave way to something that felt like neutral co-parenting. I wouldn't say we're friends, but we're not enemies either. Just two people who once shared a life and now share responsibilities. Javier didn't last. Clara told me one day, while we were building a Lego castle together, Mom says Javier moved away. I just nodded. Didn't need to know more. Jordan started opening up more too. He got into digital music production, used my old laptop to start making beats. I didn't understand half of it, but I listened. Really listened. And one day, he said, "You seem happier now." I smiled. I think I am. One evening, months after everything had calmed, Alina and I were walking out of the office together. It had been a long day, full of budget meetings and security drills, but there was a peace to it. No panic, no breach, no betrayal lurking around the corner. As we waited for the elevator, she turned to me. "You know," she said, "if Maxwell hadn't been such an ass, none of this would have happened. You wouldn't be CSO. We might still be drowning." I laughed softly. Funny how chaos clears the path sometimes. She grinned. Still boring? I smirked. Always. And that was the best part, through it all, I hadn't changed who I was. I hadn't needed to become someone louder, flashier, or more aggressive. I just had to stop letting other people define my value. A year later, Terraflex is a different company. Not perfect, but steadier, smarter. The flash and noise that Maxwell once brought in have been replaced with substance. Meetings are more thoughtful. Decisions are more deliberate. People speak less just to be heard and more when they actually have something to say. The mentorship program I started is now a core part of onboarding. We pair new hires with veterans, not just to teach systems, but to show them how to care about what they're building. About the people they're building it for. I've watched interns blossom into team leads. I've watched engineers who were nearly overlooked for promotion finally get their shot. I've even seen some of Maxwell's old hires, once addicted to the spotlight, quiet down, settle in, and actually learn to listen. Funny how culture changes when you give it room to breathe. Jordan got into Berkeley. I still don't understand half of what he plays, but I sat front row at his recital, wearing a pressed shirt Clara made me buy just for the occasion. When he hugged me after, I told him, "Your systems are just more musical than mine." He laughed. "You kept the house running. Now I'm just building on your code." Clara, now 13, wants to be an architect. She draws all the time, covering her walls with sketches and floor plans. I once asked her if she wanted to be famous. "No," she said. "Just really good." She reminds me of someone. Anika and I occasionally meet for coffee when the kids are at school. Not often. Not for long. But we talk. She once said, "I think we both got too comfortable pretending everything was fine." She wasn't wrong. And while I'll never say what happened was good, I can say it pushed us to stop pretending. She's found a better balance. We're better parents now that we're not trying to be anything else. I still get into the office early. Still drink the same bad coffee. Still keep my email inbox at 0. Some things don't need to change. But I no longer assume people know my worth just because I'm dependable. I speak up now. I take credit where it's due. I don't apologize for being steady, quiet, or methodical. And every so often, when someone tells me I'm not exciting, I just smile. Because I know something they don't, it's the boring ones who keep the world from burning down.